What happens when the woman who thought she was the clever one finds legal documents at her door and realizes she's been the target all along? How did my secret life, my whispered jokes, and my little betrayals end up costing me everything? My home, my daughter, my reputation. This is the confession I never thought I'd have to make. My name is Ulalia Drake Harker, and 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was the insurance claims adjuster who could spot a lie from 3 counties away, married to a high school English teacher who graded papers while I lived my life. I had a beautiful 9-year-old daughter, a mother who supported my every decision, and a personal trainer who made me feel alive again. I thought I was writing my own story. Turns out I was just a character in someone else's much better plot. The kitchen felt smaller every morning. Malcolm sat at our breakfast table, methodically eating his oatmeal while grading essays with red ink that seemed to bleed judgment across every page. Nora picked at her cereal, stealing glances between us like she was watching a tennis match where nobody was actually hitting the ball. "I'll be late tonight," I said, shouldering my gym bag, with what I hoped looked like casual confidence. "Big case came in yesterday, the Henderson file. Probably need to work some overtime." Malcolm's pen paused, just for a second. "Henderson file? Insurance fraud. You wouldn't understand the complexities." I kissed Nora's forehead, avoiding Malcolm's eyes. "Mummy's just trying to take better care of herself, sweetheart. Work hard, stay healthy, you know?" "Why do you need your gym clothes for work?" Nora asked, her voice small. "I go straight from the office to the gym now. More efficient." I ruffled her hair. "Daddy can handle dinner tonight, can't you, Malcolm?" He was watching me again with that unreadable expression, like he was grading an essay that didn't quite make sense. "Sure, we'll manage." The word manage stung more than it should have. We'd been managing our marriage for months now, hadn't we? Managing conversations, managing silences, managing the growing space between us that felt less like distance and more like relief. My phone buzzed. A text from Cal. "Can't wait to see you today. You're glowing lately." The flutter in my stomach was immediate, electric. This was what I'd been missing. Someone who noticed when I glowed. Someone who made me want to glow in the first place. Malcolm hadn't complimented me in months. When was the last time he'd even really looked at me? "Who's texting you?" Malcolm asked. "Work." The lie came so easily now. Probably about the Henderson case. I was almost out the door when I heard Malcolm's voice, quiet but carrying. "Nora, why don't you help me pack your lunch today? We should probably start doing more things together." Something in his tone made me pause, my hand on the doorknob. When I glanced back, Malcolm was looking directly at me, and for just a moment, his expression wasn't unreadable at all. It was calculating. But then Nora giggled at something he said, and I shook off the unease. Malcolm was a high school English teacher. He graded papers and attended parent-teacher conferences and fell asleep watching the History Channel. He wasn't calculating anything more complex than semester grades. I was the one who investigated fraud for a living. I was the one who could spot deception and manipulation. If anyone was going to be doing the calculating in this relationship, it would be me. The gym was my sanctuary. Cal was waiting by the free weights, all easy smile and perfect form. And when he saw me, his whole face lit up like I was the best part of his day. When was the last time Malcolm had looked at me like that? "There's my favorite client," Cal said, and the way he said favorite made it sound like a secret between us. "I'm not just a client anymore, am I?" I said, letting a little flirtation creep into my voice. "Definitely not." He moved closer, adjusting my form on the lat pull-down machine, his hands warm and sure on my shoulders. "How are things at home?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I sighed, letting my frustration show. Same as always. Malcolm's just so present, you know. Always there, always watching, always asking questions. I can't breathe. You deserve better than that. Cal's voice was low, intimate. You deserve someone who gives you space to be yourself. Exactly. The validation felt like oxygen. I'm just trying to take care of myself for once, and he acts like I'm committing a crime. Some people are threatened by growth, Cal said, his hand lingering on my shoulder. But I think it's beautiful watching you discover who you really are. Who I really was. Yes, that was exactly what this was about. After our session, we grabbed smoothies at the juice bar. Cal made me laugh with stories about his other clients, and I found myself telling him things I'd never told Malcolm, about my frustrations at work, my mother's expectations, the way I sometimes felt like I was disappearing into suburban mediocrity. You're too vibrant for that, Cal said, his eyes intense. Too alive. My phone buzzed. Malcolm, what time will you be home? I showed Cal the text, rolling my eyes. See what I mean? Classic controlling behavior, Cal said, shaking his head. My ex was the same way. I typed back, working late. Don't wait up. It wasn't technically a lie. I was working on myself, working on figuring out what I really wanted from life. If Malcolm couldn't understand that, it wasn't my job to explain it to him. When I finally got home at 9:30, the house was quiet. Nora was already in bed, and Malcolm was in his study with the door closed. I could hear the soft clicking of his laptop keyboard. I knocked. Malcolm, I'm home. How was work? His voice was muffled through the door. Fine, exhausting. The Henderson case is more complex than I thought. A pause. I'm sure it is. Something in his tone made me frown. Are you coming to bed soon? In a while. I have some things to finish up. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. When was the last time Malcolm had worked late? He was usually in bed by 10, reading some literary novel I'd never heard of until he fell asleep with his glasses still on. But then my phone buzzed again. Cal, sweet dreams, beautiful, tomorrow can't come soon enough. The warmth that spread through me pushed away any lingering unease about Malcolm's behavior. This was what I deserved, someone who couldn't wait to see me, someone who thought I was beautiful, someone who made me feel like I was worth waiting for. I was brushing my teeth when I heard Malcolm's study door open. Through the bathroom mirror, I watched him walk past, carrying what looked like a manila folder. He glanced toward the bathroom, saw me watching, and quickly tucked the folder under his arm. What's that? I called out. School stuff, he said, but he didn't stop walking. School stuff that he was hiding. Malcolm had never been secretive about his work. His lesson plans and grade books were usually scattered all over the kitchen table, much to my annoyance. But then again, I'd been keeping plenty of secrets lately too. Maybe we were both entitled to a little privacy. I finished getting ready for bed, humming softly to myself. Tomorrow I'd see Cal again. Tomorrow I'd feel alive again. And if Malcolm wanted to be mysterious about his schoolwork, that was his business. I was the one with the real secrets after all. I was the one living a double life. Malcolm was just Malcolm. Predictable, methodical Malcolm who graded papers and made oatmeal and fell asleep watching documentaries about World War II. What could he possibly have to hide? 3 weeks later, I was drunk on possibility. Not literally drunk, though Cal and I had started meeting at the Bistro Cafe for wine after our gym sessions, and I'd developed a taste for their expensive Pinot Grigio. I was drunk on the way Cal looked at me across our little corner table, like I was the most fascinating woman in the room. Drunk on the way, he laughed at my jokes about difficult clients and nodded sympathetically when I complained about Malcolm's increasing moodiness. He's probably just sensing the change in you, Cal said, swirling his wine. You're more confident now, more yourself. Some men can't handle that. It's not like I'm doing anything wrong, I said, which was true. We were just friends, close friends who happened to have incredible chemistry and spent increasing amounts of time together, but friends nonetheless. I'm allowed to have a social life. Of course you are. The fact that he's making you feel guilty about basic self-care is a red flag. Red flag. I like that Cal knew about psychology, about relationship dynamics. Malcolm just graded papers and made passive-aggressive comments about my new schedule. The bistro was perfect for our meetings, upscale enough to feel special, but casual enough that I could claim it was just grabbing a quick bite after the gym. And if anyone saw us, well, we were just friends. I was allowed to have friends. I should probably head home, I said, checking my phone. It was almost 8, and I'd told Malcolm I'd be back by 7. One more drink, Cal said, his hand covering mine on the table. You look so relaxed right now. I hate to see you tense up again. His thumb traced across my knuckles, and the touch sent electricity straight through me. When was the last time Malcolm had touched me like that? When was the last time any touch from Malcolm had made me feel anything other than obligation? Okay, I said. One more. Cal signaled the waitress, a pretty young thing who clearly had a crush on him. But his attention stayed focused on me, and I felt beautiful and sophisticated and alive in a way I hadn't in years. Tell me about your dreams, he said. Before you got married, before you settled down, what did you want to be? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. I never really thought about it. Come on, every little girl has dreams. I wanted to travel, I said slowly, surprised by the admission. I wanted to see Europe, maybe live in a big city. I thought I'd have adventures. And instead, you ended up in suburban purgatory with a man who doesn't appreciate you. It sounded harsh when he said it like that, but wasn't it true? When was the last time Malcolm and I had talked about dreams, about the future, about anything more meaningful than grocery lists and Nora's school schedule? It's not that simple, I said, but even as I said it, I wondered why it couldn't be. Life's shorter than you think, Cal said, his eyes intense. You deserve to be happy. My phone buzzed. Malcolm again. Dinner's getting cold. I showed Cal the text, and he shook his head. Guilt trip. Classic manipulation tactic. I typed back, eat without me. Still working. There, Cal said approvingly. You're learning to set boundaries. Boundaries. Yes, that's what this was. Healthy boundaries. When I finally got home at 9:15, Malcolm was loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision. Nora was at the kitchen table, working on homework. How was work? Malcolm asked without looking up. Fine. The Henderson case is really heating up. The lie flowed smoothly now. Sorry I'm so late. You know how these fraud investigations can get. Actually, I don't, Malcolm said, his voice carefully neutral. You've never really explained what you do. It's complicated. I kissed Nora's head. How's homework going, sweetheart? Daddy helped me with math, Nora said. He's really good at explaining things. That's nice. I was already thinking about tomorrow, about seeing Cal again, about the way he made me feel like the most interesting person in the world. Mom? Nora looked up at me with those serious brown eyes that were so much like Malcolm's. Are you okay? You seem different lately. Different how? I don't know. Happier, I guess. But also sadder. Out of the mouths of babes. Mummy's just figuring some things out, honey. Sometimes that's confusing. Malcolm's hand stilled on the dishes. What kind of things? Just life things. You wouldn't understand. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, and I saw Malcolm's jaw tighten. But before he could respond, my phone buzzed again. Cal. Can't stop thinking about our conversation tonight. You're incredible. The flutter in my stomach was immediate, and I couldn't help the small smile that crossed my face. Work again? Malcolm asked, and there was something different in his voice. Something sharper. Yeah, big case, like I said. I excused myself to go change clothes, but I could feel Malcolm watching me as I left the room. When I glanced back, he was standing in the kitchen doorway, and for just a moment, his expression reminded me of the way I looked at insurance claimants when their stories didn't add up. But that was ridiculous. Malcolm wasn't investigating me. Malcolm was just being his usual suspicious, controlling self. The next evening, I made a decision. Cal had been dropping hints about meeting my family, about being introduced to my real life, and I'd been deflecting. But why should I? He was my friend. I was allowed to have friends over for dinner. I'm inviting someone over tomorrow night, I announced at breakfast. Cal, from the gym. He's been such a great support system during this stressful time at work. Malcolm's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. Support system? You know, someone to talk to. Someone who understands the importance of self-care and personal growth. I see. Malcolm set down his mug carefully. And I don't understand those things. You understand grading papers and lesson plans, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Cal understands life. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Nora seemed to sense the tension, her eyes darting between us. Of course, Malcolm said finally. Invite whoever you want. It's your house too. Something about the way he said too bothered me, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was good. This was healthy. Malcolm needed to see that I had other people in my life, people who valued me and appreciated me. Cal arrived the next evening with flowers for me and a small toy for Nora, a thoughtful gesture that made me feel warm and appreciated. He was charming at dinner, asking Malcolm about his teaching, complimenting my cooking, making Nora giggle with silly jokes. Ulalia tells me you're working on some big case, Cal said to me, his eyes twinkling with shared conspiracy. Oh yes, I said, playing along. Very complex. Lots of late nights. She's been putting in so many extra hours, Cal said to Malcolm. You must be proud of her dedication. Malcolm's smile was polite but didn't reach his eyes. I'm always proud of Eulalia's dedication. After dinner, Cal helped me clear the table while Malcolm supervised Nora's bath time. We worked together easily, our movements synchronized in a way that felt natural and right. He seems nice enough, Cal said quietly. But I can see what you mean about the emotional distance. He's always been like that, I said. Polite but not really present, you know. You deserve passion, Cal said, his voice low. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are. The way he was looking at me made my breath catch. We were standing close, closer than friends should stand, and I could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. Ulalia, Malcolm's voice from the doorway made us both step apart. Nora wants to say goodnight. Had he seen us standing close? His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made my stomach twist with guilt I didn't want to feel. After Cal left, Malcolm and I cleaned up in silence. The easy camaraderie Cal and I had shared felt like a stark contrast to the careful politeness between Malcolm and me. He seems very attentive, Malcolm said finally. He's a good friend. I'm sure he is. Something in Malcolm's tone made me defensive. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. I'm glad you have someone to talk to about your complex cases. The way he said complex cases made it sound like he didn't believe me, and anger flared in my chest. You know what, Malcolm? Maybe if you showed half as much interest in my life as Cal does, I wouldn't need to find support elsewhere. What kind of support are we talking about exactly? Emotional support, understanding, basic human connection. I was working myself up now, and it felt good to finally say what I'd been thinking. When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, Malcolm? When was the last time you made me feel like I was more than just the person who splits the mortgage with you? Malcolm stared at me for a long moment. When was the last time you told me about your dreams, Ulalia? When was the last time you acted like you wanted to share them with me? The question caught me off guard, and I felt a flicker of something that might have been doubt. But then I remembered Cal's words about guilt trips and manipulation tactics. I shouldn't have to beg my own husband to show interest in my life, I said. You're right, Malcolm said quietly. You shouldn't. He turned and walked toward his study, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen with the uncomfortable feeling that I'd won an argument I hadn't meant to start. Later, lying in bed while Malcolm worked late in his study again, I texted Cal. Thank you for tonight. Having you there made everything feel more bearable. His response was immediate. You deserve so much better than bearable. You deserve extraordinary. Extraordinary. Yes, that's exactly what I deserved. I was drifting off to sleep when I heard Malcolm's study door open. Through half-closed eyes, I watched him move around the room, getting ready for bed with his usual quiet efficiency. But instead of his typical routine, he stopped at the dresser and stood there for a long moment, looking at something in his hands. Another manila folder. Malcolm, I mumbled sleepily. What's that? He startled slightly, then slipped the folder into the top drawer. Nothing important. Go back to sleep. Nothing important that he was hiding in the dresser drawer. Nothing important that he was looking at with the same intense focus he usually reserved for particularly challenging student essays. But I was too tired and too content with thoughts of Cal's attention to pursue it. Malcolm could have his little secrets. I had much more interesting ones. By October, I had constructed an elaborate architecture of deception, and I was proud of how well built it was. Every lie had a foundation, every excuse had supporting details, every alibi had been stress-tested in my mind before I spoke it aloud. The Henderson case had become my masterpiece of fiction. I'd given it a complex backstory involving a suspicious house fire, a claimant with a history of financial problems, and the need for extensive surveillance and document review. I'd even created fake overtime slips, carefully backdating them and slipping them into my timesheet submissions. Janet from HR barely glanced at them. She trusted me, and why shouldn't she? I'd been a model employee for 6 years. You're putting in a lot of extra hours lately, Janet mentioned one afternoon, as I gathered my things to leave for another surveillance session. Big case, I said, tapping my temple. But I've almost got them figured out. Insurance fraud is all about patience and attention to detail. Well, don't burn yourself out. The company appreciates dedication, but we want you healthy too. Healthy. If only she knew how healthy I felt these days. How alive and vibrant and appreciated. Cal had started calling me his afternoon sunshine, and every text from him made me feel like I was glowing from the inside out. Our routine had evolved into something beautifully intimate. Gym sessions that ran long because we were so deep in conversation. Smoothies that turned into wine. Wine that turned into dinner. Dinners that ran so late that I'd finally perfected the art of slipping into my house like a teenager breaking curfew. You're different lately, Cal said one evening as we shared appetizers at the bistro. More confident. It's sexy. Sexy. When was the last time Malcolm had called me sexy? When was the last time Malcolm had called me anything other than Ulalia or honey, in that distracted tone he used when he was thinking about something else? I feel different, I admitted, like I'm finally becoming who I was supposed to be. And who's that? Someone who doesn't apologize for wanting more from life. Cal raised his wine glass. To wanting more. We clinked glasses, and the sound felt like a promise. My phone buzzed. Malcolm. Nora has a soccer game Saturday at 2. Will you be there? I frowned. Saturday was my long gym session with Cal, followed by what had become our traditional weekend lunch. I might have to work, I typed back. On Saturday? Cal asked, reading over my shoulder. He's being controlling again, trying to guilt me into family obligations. That's not fair to you. You work hard all week. You deserve your weekends. Exactly. I worked hard. I deserve my time with Cal. If Malcolm wanted me at Nora's soccer game, he should have thought about that before he let our marriage turn into a business partnership. Tell him you have a work emergency, Cal suggested. Something that can't wait. I typed, Henderson case is heating up. Might have to do weekend surveillance. Will try to make it if I can. There, Cal said approvingly. Boundaries. But when Saturday came, I found myself feeling unexpectedly guilty as I watched Cal demonstrate proper deadlift form. Nora had been excited about her game. had specifically asked me to come watch her play midfielder. She'd been practicing her footwork in the backyard every evening, and I'd been too distracted to really notice. "You seem tense," Cal said, his hands on my shoulders as he adjusted my posture. "What's going on in that beautiful head of yours?" "Just thinking about my daughter. She has a soccer game today." "And you feel guilty for taking care of yourself instead of playing soccer, Mom?" When he put it like that, it did sound ridiculous. I guess. "Ulalia, look at me." His hands moved to frame my face, and suddenly we were standing much closer than trainer and client should stand. "You can't pour from an empty cup. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Your daughter needs a happy, fulfilled mother, not a martyr." He was right, of course, and the way he was looking at me, the way his thumbs traced gently across my cheekbones, made everything else seem far away and unimportant. "You're right," I whispered. "I'm always right about you," he said, his voice low and intimate. We were still standing close when my phone rang. Malcolm's ringtone. I stepped back from Cal, my heart hammering. "I should take this." "Ulalia." Malcolm's voice was tight. "Where are you?" "Working. I told you, the Henderson case. Nora scored her first goal. She's been looking for you in the stands." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I'm sorry. I tried to get away, but this case is just so demanding right now." "Right. The case." There was something in Malcolm's voice I'd never heard before. Something cold and sharp. "Well, I'll be sure to tell Nora that work was more important." "That's not fair." But he'd already hung up. Cal was watching me with sympathetic eyes. "Guilt trip. He's making me feel terrible for doing my job. Classic emotional manipulation. He's using your daughter to control you." "Using Nora to control me." Yes, that's exactly what Malcolm was doing. He knew I'd feel guilty about missing her game, so he was weaponizing that guilt to make me fall in line. Well, I wasn't falling for it anymore. "Let's get lunch," I said, pushing thoughts of soccer games and first goals out of my mind. I deserve to celebrate closing the Henderson case. "You closed it?" "As good as," I said, which wasn't technically a lie. I'd close it Monday morning with a standard denial letter. Insurance fraud cases were mostly about paperwork anyway. At lunch, Cal regaled me with stories about his other clients, and I found myself laughing harder than I had in months. He was funny and charming, and made me feel like the center of his universe. When he reached across the table to tuck a strand of hair behind my ear, I didn't pull away. "You're so beautiful when you laugh," he said. "Cal, I know you're married, but I can't help how I feel about you." The confession hung between us like a bridge I could either cross or burn. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger, but Cal's eyes were so warm and appreciative and alive. "I care about you too," I said quietly. It wasn't a declaration of love, wasn't a promise to leave my husband, wasn't even technically an admission of anything inappropriate, but it felt like the most honest thing I'd said in months. When I got home that evening, Nora ran to me with her participation trophy, her face bright with excitement. "Mommy, I scored a goal. Coach said it was perfect." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I hugged her tight, breathing in her little girl scent of grass stains and strawberry shampoo. "I'm so proud of you. Daddy took a video. Do you want to see?" "Of course." We sat on the couch together, Nora curled against my side as Malcolm's phone showed her running down the field, focused and determined, before kicking the ball perfectly into the corner of the net. The joy on her face was radiant, and my heart clenched with love and guilt in equal measure. "That's my girl," I said, kissing the top of her head. "I looked for you," she said quietly. "Daddy said you were working." "I was, baby. I'm sorry I missed it, but I'm here now." "Will you come to my next game?" "I'll try." It wasn't a promise, and we both knew it. Later, after Nora was in bed, I found Malcolm in his study. The door was open for once, and he was sitting at his desk with papers spread in front of him. Not student essays, something else. something he quickly covered with a book when I appeared in the doorway. "Thank you for taking the video," I said. "She was amazing." "She was." Malcolm's voice was neutral, polite. "She's been practicing every day. You would have noticed if you'd been around." "I've been working." "The Henderson case." "Right." Malcolm turned to face me fully, and something in his expression made me take a step back. "Tell me about this case, Ulalia. I'm curious about the details." "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been working on it for months. It must be fascinating. What kind of fraud are we talking about? What's the claim amount? Who's the claimant?" The questions came rapid fire, and I felt like I was being cross-examined. "It's complicated. I can't really discuss the specifics. Client confidentiality." "Of course." Malcolm's smile was thin. "Well, I hope you solve it soon. All this overtime must be exhausting." "It is," I said, relieved that he seemed to be backing down. "I should probably get some sleep." "Good idea. You'll need your energy for all that surveillance work." Something about the way he said surveillance work made my skin prickle, but I was too tired to analyze his tone. I said goodnight and headed upstairs, already thinking about tomorrow's session with Cal. I was brushing my teeth when I heard Malcolm's study door close. Then the soft sound of a filing cabinet opening and closing. Then his footsteps on the stairs, but instead of coming to our bedroom, they went to the guest room. When I came out of the bathroom, I found a pillow and blanket on his side of the bed. "Malcolm," I called softly. "I've been having trouble sleeping," his voice came from down the hall. "Didn't want to disturb you." Trouble sleeping. In 6 years of marriage, Malcolm had never had trouble sleeping. He was the kind of person who was unconscious within minutes of his head hitting the pillow. But if he wanted to sleep in the guest room, that was fine with me. It would make my late nights easier, and honestly, the space felt good. Healthy, even. We both needed room to figure out what we wanted from this marriage. I fell asleep, thinking about Cal's hands on my face, the way he'd looked at me when I'd admitted I cared about him. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving towards something instead of away from it. I didn't know that 3 doors down, Malcolm was sitting in the guest room with a laptop and a manila folder, methodically building a case that would make my fictional Henderson investigation look like amateur hour. I didn't know that my overtime slips had already been flagged by HR for discrepancies with my keycard logs. I didn't know that my credit card statements were being quietly reviewed, that my text messages were being recovered, that my carefully constructed architecture of lies was about to be demolished by someone who understood the importance of documentation and evidence. I thought I was the investigator in this story. I was wrong. The beginning of the end started with what I thought was a brilliant idea. Cal had been hinting for weeks that he wanted to meet my friends, to be part of my real world instead of just our private bubble at the gym and the bistro. And honestly, I was proud of him. Proud of how he looked, how he made me feel, how he represented everything vibrant and alive that had been missing from my life. "Let's make it official," I said one evening as we shared our usual corner table. "I want you to meet my people." "Your people?" "My friends. My real friends. Not just Malcolm's teacher colleagues who think wine spritzers are exotic." I was feeling bold, empowered by 3 glasses of Pinot Grigio, and the way Cal was looking at me like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. "There's a group that meets here Thursday nights. Janet from work, some of the other girls from the office, a few neighbors. You should join us." Cal's smile was slow and satisfied. "I'd love to meet the people who know the real you." The real me. Yes, that's exactly what this was about. For too long, I'd been hiding the best parts of myself, dimming my light to accommodate Malcolm's steady, boring presence. It was time for the world to see who I really was when I was allowed to shine. Thursday night, I arrived at the bistro early to claim our usual table. I'd dressed carefully, a black wrap dress that Cal had complimented, heels that made my legs look amazing, makeup that took 45 minutes but looked effortless. I felt beautiful and confident, and ready to show off the man who made me feel that way. Janet arrived first, with 2 other women from the office. Then my neighbor Sarah with her sister. By 7:30, we had a lively table of 6 women, all chatting and laughing over appetizers and wine. "So where's this mysterious trainer you've been telling us about?" Janet asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "He'll be here," I said, checking my phone. Cal was running a few minutes late, but that just built anticipation. When he walked in, I felt a surge of pride. He looked incredible, fitted jeans, a navy button-down that showed off his shoulders, that confident smile that made me feel chosen. Every woman at the table noticed him, and I loved watching their faces as he headed straight for us. "Ladies," Cal said, his voice warm and charming, "you must be Eulalia's famous friends." The introductions went smoothly. Cal was at his best, funny, attentive, asking the right questions and making everyone feel special. He fit seamlessly into our group, and I could see the approval in my friend's eyes. "So you're the one who's been keeping our Ulalia so busy," Sarah said with a knowing smile. "Guilty as charged," Cal said, his hand finding mine on the table, "though I think she's been keeping me just as busy." The casual intimacy of the gesture sent a thrill through me. This was what I'd been missing, someone who wanted to claim me publicly, who wasn't afraid to show affection, who made it clear that I was his priority. We were on our second round of drinks when Malcolm walked in. I saw him before he saw us, standing in the doorway of the bistro like he was surveying a crime scene. My blood turned to ice, but I forced myself to stay calm. I was having dinner with friends. I was allowed to have dinner with friends. "Ulalia." His voice was quiet, but it carried across the restaurant as he approached our table. "I've been looking for you." "Looking for me?" I kept my voice light, casual. "I told you I was having dinner with the girls." Malcolm's eyes swept the table, taking in the wine glasses, the intimate seating arrangement, the way Cal's hand was still covering mine. "Did you?" "Of course I did." The lie came automatically, even though I knew I hadn't mentioned dinner plans. I'd been too excited about introducing Cal to think about covering my tracks with Malcolm. "Interesting." Malcolm's smile was polite, but his eyes were cold. "And you must be Cal." Cal stood, extending his hand with easy confidence. "That's right. You must be the husband. Eulalia's told me so much about you." "Has she?" Malcolm shook Cal's hand, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Funny, she's never mentioned you at all." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel my friend's eyes darting between the 3 of us, sensing drama but not understanding its source. "Well," I said brightly, "now you've met. Cal is my trainer at the gym. He's been helping me get back in shape." "Among other things, I'm sure," Malcolm said quietly. The words hit like a slap. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm curious about all this training you've been doing, all these late nights at the gym, all these work emergencies that seem to happen right when our daughter needs you most." "Malcolm," my voice was sharp with warning, "not here." But Cal was already rising to his feet, his protective instincts kicking in. "Hey man, I don't know what your problem is, but you're being pretty disrespectful to your wife." "My wife?" Malcolm's laugh was bitter. "Right, my wife who's been lying to me for months. My wife who's been inventing fake insurance cases to cover up her affair." The words hung in the air like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. I could feel my friend's shock, could see the way they were looking at me with new understanding. "You're being paranoid," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. "Am I?" "The Henderson case, Ulalia." "Tell me about the Henderson case." My mouth went dry. "I told you I can't discuss." "There is no Henderson case." Malcolm's voice was calm, factual. "I called your office. I spoke to Janet here." He nodded toward my coworker, whose face had gone pale. "And she confirmed that you haven't worked a major fraud case in 6 months." The silence was absolute now. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel sweat breaking out along my hairline. That's not. I looked at Janet, desperate for support, but she was staring at her wine glass. He called the office, Janet said quietly. Asked about your overtime hours. I had to tell him, Ulalia. The timesheets don't match your keycard logs. HR flagged them yesterday. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. You talked to my husband about my work. He said he was worried about you, said you'd been working impossible hours and he was concerned about your health. So you violated my privacy. I violated company policy, Janet said, her voice growing stronger. Those overtime slips you've been submitting, they're fraudulent. You've been claiming to work hours when the building security shows you never even entered the office. The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. This was supposed to be my night, my moment to show off my new life and my new happiness. Okay, everyone just needs to calm down, Cal said, his hand moving to my shoulder. This is obviously a private matter between husband and wife. You're right, Malcolm said. It is private, which makes me wonder why my wife's private trainer knows so much about our marriage problems. Because she needed someone to talk to, Cal shot back, someone who actually listens to her instead of ignoring her. Is that what I do? Ignore her? From what I hear, yeah. When was the last time you made her feel appreciated? When was the last time you treated her like she was worth your attention? Malcolm was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe Cal had gotten through to him. Maybe he'd realized that this was his fault, that his neglect had driven me to seek connection elsewhere. Instead, Malcolm pulled out his phone. You're right, he said calmly. I haven't been paying enough attention. I've been too focused on other things, like wondering why my wife's credit card shows charges at this restaurant 3 times a week when she claims to be working late. Like wondering why her gym membership shows check-ins that don't match her claimed work schedule. Like wondering why she's been lying to me for months. He held up his phone, and I could see he had screenshots. Screenshots of credit card statements, gym logs, something that looked like a calendar with dates highlighted in red. You've been spying on me, I whispered. I've been paying attention, Malcolm corrected. Finally. Cal stepped forward, his chest puffed with protective anger. Look, man, I don't care what kind of evidence you think you have. The way you're treating Ulalia right now is unacceptable. The way I'm treating her? Yeah, she's a grown woman who deserves respect and happiness. If you can't provide that, maybe you should step aside for someone who can. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I saw Malcolm's jaw tighten, saw something flash in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Someone like you? Malcolm asked quietly. Someone like me, Cal confirmed, his voice full of bravado. And then Cal did something that changed everything. He leaned down and kissed me. Not a friendly peck, not an accidental brush of lips, but a full, passionate kiss that claimed me completely in front of my husband, my friends, and half the restaurant. His hands tangled in my hair, and for a moment I was so shocked I just stood there, frozen. When he finally pulled away, his eyes were bright with triumph. There, he said loudly, making sure everyone in the restaurant could hear. Now it's all out in the open. Ulalia deserves better than a man who takes her for granted. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel every eye in the restaurant on us, could see phones being pulled out to record the drama. My carefully constructed double life had just exploded in the most public way possible. But instead of the angry confrontation I expected, Malcolm just smiled. Thank you, he said to Cal, his voice perfectly calm. Thank you. Cal looked confused. Thank you for making this so easy. Malcolm turned to the bartender, who had been watching the whole scene with wide eyes. Excuse me, do you have security cameras in this corner of the restaurant? Yes, sir. Great. I'm going to need a copy of tonight's footage, for my attorney. Malcolm pulled out a business card and handed it to the bartender. Have them contact this number. They'll explain the legal requirements. My legs felt weak. Malcolm, what I should have done months ago. He looked at me with eyes that were completely devoid of warmth. I'll be filing for divorce tomorrow morning. Full custody of Nora, based on adultery and fraud. The footage from tonight should make the case pretty straightforward. You can't. I can. I have. Malcolm's smile was cold and satisfied. You've been so busy living your new life, you forgot that actions have consequences. But don't worry, I've been keeping track of everything. Every lie, every fake overtime slip, every romantic dinner you charged to our joint credit card while telling me you were working. He turned to go, then paused and looked back at Cal. By the way, you might want to be careful. Ulalia's very good at making people believe what she wants them to believe. Just ask her about the Henderson case. And then he walked out, leaving me standing in the middle of the bistro with Cal's kiss still burning on my lips and my entire life in ruins around my feet. The restaurant was dead silent, except for the soft clicking of phone cameras. My friends were staring at me with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Janet was shaking her head slowly, and I knew my job was over along with everything else. Ulalia, Cal said quietly, his bravado completely gone. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for... Get away from me, I whispered. What? Get away from me. The words came out as a scream, and I saw Cal take a step back, his face pale with shock. Everyone was staring, everyone was recording. Everyone would know by tomorrow that Ulalia Drake Harker had been cheating on her husband with her personal trainer, that she'd been caught in lies and fraud, that her marriage was over and her reputation was destroyed. I grabbed my purse and ran for the door, pushing past curious diners and ignoring the calls of my former friends. In the parking lot, I fumbled for my car keys with shaking hands, my vision blurred with tears of rage and humiliation. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. This wasn't the story I'd been writing. But as I drove home through the dark streets of our suburban neighborhood, I began to realize that I'd never been writing this story at all. I'd just been a character in Malcolm's much better plot. And the climax was still to come. The video went viral overnight. Not globally viral. I wasn't that lucky or unlucky, depending on how you looked at it. But locally viral, which was somehow worse. By Friday morning, the footage of Cal kissing me in the middle of the bistro while my husband calmly requested security camera access had been shared across every neighborhood Facebook group, every parent WhatsApp chain, every local social media network in our small suburban community. The comments were brutal. Always thought she was stuck up. Guess we know why now. Poor kid, imagine having a mother like that. The husband handled it like a boss, though, ice cold. She's been lying about working late for months. What kind of person does that? I heard she was committing fraud at her job, too. That last one wasn't technically true yet, but it would be by Monday morning. Janet had called me Friday morning, her voice professionally cold, to inform me that I was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation into my timesheet discrepancies. Ulalia, I have to ask, she said, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice. How long has this been going on? It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. You've been falsifying overtime claims to cover up an affair. Do you understand how serious this is? This isn't just about your marriage. This is about fraud. Criminal fraud. Criminal fraud. The words hit me like ice water. In all my careful construction of alibis and excuses, I'd somehow forgotten that lying on timesheets wasn't just morally questionable, it was illegal. Janet, please, I can explain. Save it for HR. And Ulalia, don't bother coming in Monday. Security will pack up your desk and mail your personal items. The line went dead, and I sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, trying to process the fact that my career was over. 6 years of building a reputation as a thorough, trustworthy investigator destroyed in one night. My phone buzzed. A text from Cal. We need to talk. I stared at the message, feeling nothing but exhaustion. Cal, who had seemed so charming and supportive and understanding. Cal, who had kissed me in public and destroyed my marriage in front of half the town. Cal, who had disappeared while I was screaming at him in the restaurant parking lot and hadn't contacted me until now. No, I typed back, we really don't. Ulalia, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for things to go that far. I was just trying to defend you. Defend me. By kissing me in front of my husband and making sure everyone in town knew I was an adulteress. Leave me alone, I replied, then blocked his number. The house felt like a tomb. Malcolm had taken Nora to his mother's house Thursday night and hadn't brought her back. When I called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. When I called Gina's house, she hung up on me. Gina, please, I said when I called back. I just want to talk to my daughter. Your daughter is fine. Gina's voice was arctic. She's where she should be, with people who actually care about her well-being. I care about her well-being. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you care about your gym boyfriend more than you care about your family. The accusation stung because it wasn't entirely wrong. How many of Nora's soccer games had I missed for Cal? How many bedtime stories had I skipped for wine at the bistro? How many conversations with my daughter had I cut short because I was texting with my trainer? I made some mistakes, I said quietly, but I'm still her mother. Being a mother is more than biology, Ulalia. It's about showing up. It's about putting your child first. When's the last time you did that? I couldn't answer because I couldn't remember. Malcolm is filing for full custody, Gina continued, and frankly, I hope he gets it. Nora deserves better than a mother who lies and cheats and puts her own selfish desires above her child's needs. The line went dead, and I found myself alone in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. By Saturday, the story had spread beyond social media. I made the mistake of going to the grocery store and felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispers that followed me down the aisles. The checkout girl, who had always been friendly, barely made eye contact. The bag boy, who usually helped me to my car, suddenly became very busy with other tasks. At the pharmacy, picking up a prescription for the anxiety medication my doctor had called in, I ran into Sarah from the restaurant. Ulalia, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Sarah, hi. How are you holding up? The question seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt a flicker of hope that maybe not everyone had written me off completely. It's been difficult, I said carefully, but I'm managing. Good, that's good. Sarah looked around the pharmacy, then leaned closer. Listen, I have to ask, how long was it going on? With the trainer? It's not what everyone thinks. What is it then? I opened my mouth to explain, to tell her about the emotional connection, the way Cal had made me feel valued and appreciated, the way my marriage had been dead long before I met him. But looking at Sarah's face, I realized how pathetic it would all sound. I don't know, I said finally. Well, Sarah said, stepping back, I hope you figure it out, for Nora's sake. For Nora's sake. Everyone was so concerned about Nora's sake, but where had all this concern been when I was drowning in a loveless marriage, when I was working myself to death to pay for a house and a life that felt like a prison? But even as I thought it, I knew it was unfair. Nora hadn't asked for any of this. Nora was 9 years old and probably confused and scared, and wondering why Mommy wasn't coming home. That night, I called my mother. Oh, honey, Vivian said, her voice full of sympathy. I saw the video. That awful man ambushing you like that in public. Finally, someone who understood. It was humiliating, Mom. He planned the whole thing. Of course he did. Men like Malcolm, they can't stand to see a woman grow and change. They want to keep you small and dependent. Exactly. I was just trying to find myself, to be happy for once in my life. And there's nothing wrong with that. You deserve happiness, Ulalia. You deserve love and appreciation and all the things that man never gave you. My mother's validation felt like a lifeline, and I found myself crying for the first time since Thursday night. What am I going to do, Mom? He's trying to take Nora away from me. He can't do that. You're her mother. But the fraud charges and the affair. What affair? You were having coffee with a friend. So what if you developed feelings? You're human. Coffee with a friend. It sounded so innocent when she put it like that, so reasonable. Maybe that's all it had been. Maybe everyone was overreacting. "Can I come stay with you for a while?" I asked. "Just until this all blows over?" "Of course, honey. Come home. We'll figure this out together." Home. Yes, maybe that's what I needed. Some distance from the gossip and the judgment, some time to regroup and plan my next move. I was packing a suitcase when I heard a car in the driveway. My heart leaped. Maybe Malcolm was bringing Nora home. Maybe we could talk this through like adults. But when I looked out the window, it wasn't Malcolm's car. It was a white sedan with official plates, and the woman getting out was wearing a business suit and carrying a briefcase. The doorbell rang, and I considered not answering, but hiding wouldn't make this go away. Ulalia Harker. The woman was young, professional, with kind eyes that somehow made everything worse. "Yes. I'm Rebecca Chen from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with you about your daughter, Nora." Child Protective Services. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Why? "May I come in?" I let her into my living room, the same living room where Cal had charmed my family just weeks ago, where Nora had shown me her homework and asked me about my day back when I still came home for dinner. "Mrs. Harker, we've received some concerns about Nora's welfare. I need to ask you some questions." "What kind of concerns?" Rebecca consulted her notes. "Reports of parental neglect, extended absences from the home, possible substance abuse." "Substance abuse?" I was incredulous. I don't use drugs. "What about alcohol?" I thought about all those wine-soaked dinners with Cal, all those afternoons at the bistro that stretched into evening. "I have a glass of wine occasionally. That's not substance abuse. How often is occasionally?" The question hung in the air, and I realized I didn't know how to answer it honestly. "Mrs. Harker, when was the last time you spent a full evening at home with your daughter?" I tried to remember. Before Cal, certainly. But when exactly? "I've been working a lot lately. A big case. The Henderson case." My blood turned to ice. "How do you know about that?" "Because there is no Henderson case, Mrs. Harker. Your employer confirmed that you've been falsifying work records for months. The question is, where were you when you claimed to be working?" I felt like I was drowning. "I want a lawyer." "That's your right, but Mrs. Harker, I want you to understand what's happening here. Your husband has filed for emergency custody of your daughter. He's provided evidence of fraud, adultery, and child neglect. Unless you can demonstrate that you're able to provide a safe, stable environment for Nora, she's going to remain in her father's custody." "She's my daughter." "Yes, she is. And right now, she's asking why Mommy doesn't come home anymore." The words hit me harder than anything Malcolm had said, harder than losing my job or becoming a social media scandal. Nora was asking for me, and I wasn't there. "What do I need to do?" I whispered. Rebecca's expression softened slightly. "Get help, Mrs. Harker. Get honest, and get your priorities straight. Because right now, the court is going to see a mother who chose an affair over her child, and that's not going to end well for you." After she left, I sat in my empty house and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. A month ago, I'd been happy. I'd been alive and appreciated and moving towards something better. Now I was unemployed, publicly humiliated, and facing the loss of my daughter. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is what happens when you mess with other people's families. Hope it was worth it. Then another. Saw the video. You're disgusting. And another. Poor Nora. She deserves better than you. I turned off my phone and finished packing. Maybe my mother was right. Maybe I just needed to get away from all this judgment and toxicity, find some perspective, figure out how to rebuild. But as I loaded my suitcase into my car, I caught sight of myself in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me was hollow-eyed and desperate, nothing like the confident, vibrant person I'd thought I was becoming. For the first time since this all started, I wondered if everyone else was right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I'd been the problem all along. 3 months later, I sat in a courthouse that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams, watching my life get dissected by lawyers who spoke about me like I wasn't in the room. My attorney, a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, shuffled through papers with the enthusiasm of someone reading a grocery list. Malcolm sat across the aisle with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman who'd clearly done her homework. Between them sat a manila folder that had grown thick with evidence over the past months. My evidence. Evidence of every lie I'd told, every corner I'd cut, every choice I'd made that put my own desires above my daughter's needs. Your Honor, Malcolm's attorney began, her voice clear and confident. The evidence in this case paints a clear picture of a mother who abandoned her responsibilities in pursuit of an extramarital affair. I wanted to object, to explain that it hadn't been that simple, that my marriage had been dead long before I met Cal. But my lawyer had advised me to stay quiet unless directly questioned. Mrs. Harker systematically defrauded her employer, lying about overtime hours to cover up her absences. She missed her daughter's school events, soccer games, and bedtime routines. She brought her affair partner into the family home and introduced him to the child as a friend. Each word felt like a nail in my coffin. Technically, everything she was saying was true, but it missed all the context, all the reasons why I'd been so desperate for connection and validation. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, Mrs. Harker has shown no remorse for her actions and continues to blame others for the consequences of her choices. That wasn't true. I felt plenty of remorse. I was drowning in it, but apparently, remorse wasn't enough to undo months of selfish decisions. Mr. Harker, on the other hand, has been the stable, consistent parent throughout this ordeal. He maintained employment, ensured the child's educational and emotional needs were met, and protected her from the chaos of her mother's double life. I glanced at Malcolm, sitting straight and composed in his suit. He looked like the responsible adult in the room, while I felt like a teenager who'd been caught sneaking out. When had our roles reversed so completely? The state calls Malcolm Harker to the stand. I watched my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, walk to the witness box with steady steps. He looked directly at the judge when he was sworn in, his voice clear and confident. Mr. Harker, please tell the court about your wife's behavior in the months leading up to your separation. Malcolm's testimony was devastating in its calm precision. He spoke about my increasing absences, my defensive responses to simple questions, my emotional distance from Nora. He presented evidence methodically. Credit card statements showing dinners I'd claimed were work meetings, gym logs that contradicted my supposed work schedule, text messages I'd thought were private. Did you attempt to address these concerns with your wife? The lawyer asked. Multiple times. When I asked about her late nights, she became defensive and accused me of being controlling. When I expressed concern about her missing Nora's activities, she said I didn't understand the pressures of her job. How did your daughter react to her mother's absences? Malcolm's composed facade cracked slightly. She started having trouble sleeping. Her grades dropped. She asked me repeatedly why Mommy didn't want to spend time with her anymore. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on my own happiness that I'd missed my daughter's pain. Mr. Harker, what made you decide to investigate your wife's activities? When she missed Nora's first goal at soccer, Nora had been practicing for weeks, was so excited for me to see her play. When I called to tell Ulalia about the goal, she said she was working. But Nora's face... Malcolm paused, collecting himself. That's when I realized I needed to know what was really going on. And what did you discover? That my wife had been lying to me for months. The case she claimed to be working on didn't exist. The overtime she'd been claiming was fraudulent. She'd been having an affair and using our joint credit card to pay for romantic dinners with another man. When it was my attorney's turn to cross-examine, he tried to paint Malcolm as controlling and suspicious, but every question backfired. Malcolm's responses were measured and factual, and he never lost his temper or said anything that made him look vindictive. "Mr. Harker, isn't it true that you hired a private investigator to spy on your wife?" "I documented her activities, yes. When someone you love starts lying to you, you need to know the truth. And you used that information to humiliate her publicly at a restaurant." "I went to the restaurant because I was looking for my wife, who had told me she was working late. I found her having dinner with her affair partner. I didn't create that situation. I just refused to pretend it wasn't happening." Point after point Malcolm came across as the wronged party who had handled an impossible situation with dignity and restraint. Then it was my turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking to my own execution. I could feel Malcolm's eyes on me, could see Nora's school counselor in the gallery, could hear the scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her machine, recording every word for posterity. "Mrs. Harker," my attorney began, "please tell the court about the state of your marriage before you began spending time with Mr. Finch." I'd rehearsed this answer, but sitting in the witness box with everyone staring at me, the words felt hollow and self-serving. My marriage had been struggling for years. Malcolm and I had grown apart. We barely communicated, rarely spent time together. I felt lonely and unappreciated. And Mr. Finch provided emotional support during this difficult time. Yes, he listened to me, made me feel valued. It wasn't initially romantic, it was friendship. When did the relationship become romantic? On the stand, I tried to pretend it developed gradually, but the truth was simple. I chose Cal long before I admitted it. Malcolm's lawyer forced me into one crushing yes after another. No counseling, no honest talks, lies about overtime, shared money spent on dates, missed moments with my daughter. Then witnesses piled on. His mother, the school counselor, even a co-worker. My own mother couldn't defend me. The judge ruled fast. Malcolm got primary custody. I got supervised visits, child support, repayment, and my case was sent for fraud review. Malcolm didn't gloat. He just looked tired and sad and said he wanted our family to survive, but I made it impossible. Cal vanished. And in the silence afterward, I finally understood I hadn't just lost a marriage, I'd lost my daughter's trust.